Uchenna really tells it like it is. She's a graduate of UNB as an international student, and she is now the owner-operator of her Nigerian food business right here in the city. This is episode 2 of Newcomers in Business. Uchenna, thanks for doing this.
Yes, you're welcome, man.
Sure. We see that when someone is interviewing someone, they typically like to introduce the guest.
Yes.
But for this series of interviews, I thought it's actually important that you introduce yourself. I want you to be represented how you feel you should be represented. So tell us what we should know about you and introduce yourself.
Okay. Well, my name is Uchenna Ude. My middle name is Mildred, which I usually like to give people because, sometimes Uchenna may get a bit tricky for some people. So I moved here about 10 years ago now at the university. And I own a Nigerian or African food business called Don't Hate Cause You Ain't A. But I've also just renamed it to Afia, African Cuisine.
Oh, that's lovely.
Yeah, but Don't Hate Cause You Ain't A is going to stay as the tag name, but Afia, African Cuisine would now be the business name.
That's really nice. Thanks.
Yes.
We know that in any immigration setting, whether it's for business, whether it's government assisted, it doesn't matter. There's always a settlement phase before you feel comfortable starting to work on your goals.
Absolutely.
And so that can be finding a place to live, that can be health care, that can be setting up your bank account. You've been with us for 10 years, so you're an expert at this point, but take us back to the beginning. What was your experience of being welcomed to St. John? And be honest about that. I know everyone has a different experience.
Right. I wouldn't even say it was a welcoming, so to speak. I felt like I was just thrown in. I was thrown in, and there weren't a lot of programs that recognized international students. So I moved here at the university, right? This was in 2009, and it was in January. It was winter, it was cold, it was everything.
It's a hard time to come.
Exactly. So we got the normal orientation process like every other student, right? But I think there was I don't want to say failure to recognize, but there wasn't like any special treatment or recognition for students that weren't just only coming to the university for the first time, but had left like a whole country and is in a whole different environment, right?
It wasn't what it is now.
It's definitely not what it is now. So when I think back on that day, I just remember the long, dark, cold roads from the airport to the university. I remember being very hungry, which is what led to my business, but I remember being very hungry. I remember saying I was hungry to, I think it was like a taxi driver or something, and being taken to Tim Hortons and having like Timbits, and I didn't like it.
That's really interesting because I always think the same is multiculturalism isn't easy.
No, it's
right?
not.
It's not easy to be a welcoming community. So the way I see it, when you're coming into a place like St. John, you need to be able to have access to the food you like, to dress the way you choose, to pray the way you choose.
Exactly.
And so when you don't have institutions like that around you, it's hard to feel welcome.
Exactly. No, 100%. And for me, food was a big thing because food culturally, where I'm from, is a big way of like celebrating. It's a big way of welcoming people, So the lack of food was, I kid you not, and I tell everyone this story. I remember I think it was the first or maybe the second day of school, and then I was hungry and I went to the Tim Hortons at school and I got a muffin, and they have like this like little seat area, next to, and I cried over my muffin. That's how bad. That is literally how bad it was. That's how depressed I was over the lack of food.
That's an amazing thing though, because why we're doing this type of interview is that for those coming in who are having a similar experience, you're 10 years in. You can look back and say, I overcame that, but there was nothing easy about it.
Absolutely
There's nothing easy about multiculturalism.
Absolutely not. And it's not like it was nice out, like I could just wear flip-flops and walk around and look for the next closest market, right? It's January, it's cold, I don't know where anywhere is. Oh, there's some Sobeys. What is Sobeys? And you're walking around the grocery store lost. So yes, it was a lot.
So let's switch to your business.
Yes.
The same way that a community has to be welcoming in terms of settlement, we also need to have supports and institutions around newcomers wanting to set up their businesses here.
Right.
So for a city like St. John, if we're going to attract newcomer professionals,
Right.
newcomer entrepreneurs, what are the kinds of things that you think a community has to have in place?
In place. You know what? Knowing what I know now, I think the two biggest things that stand up for me is there are resources here. So I would never say is a lack of resources. Is getting the right people, the immigrants and those interested in starting off businesses to know that those resources exist.
Yes.
I didn't know they existed until this past year when I did the business immigration program, which I didn't even really know about. I just happened to, stumble upon through a friend that worked at the program, that I knew from the university. And so I would say is knowing the resources and the people staying committed to supporting the businesses as well. Because actually, in fact, for me, that's number one on the list is the people. Because most of us come here and we leave and we take our business ideas somewhere else. Because, St. John now, 10 years later since I've been here, is growing in regards to multiculturalism.
Yes.
But locally, there's still not that strong sense. Now people support you. They're like, oh, where are you from?
Yep.
Welcome, or we'll do this. And then it's once and then you don't see them again. For any business to survive, we continuously need the support of the customers, right?
Yep.
So it's not simply enough to try out. And don't get me wrong, everyone has their preferences. I'm not going to force you to eat food that you're not interested in, right? But if it's something that you genuinely like, then it has to be as mainstream. Me as the business owner, I would work to make it mainstream, even in its, difference and whatnot. But it has to be a continual process.
And you make a good point, because you have to take into consideration that we are a very welcoming community.
Right.
So if you did a pop-up and you're offering your food for free, you're going to have 50 smiling faces come and take your food and say, good luck, we can't wait to see your business.
Right.
That doesn't mean someone's going to pay for a dish.
No, that's the problem. And that exactly is the problem.
Yeah, so one of the things, I was at meetings in Ottawa this past week, and one of the things that a newcomer entrepreneur made a very good point in, it says we focus a lot on startup support, which is great, but there has to be what she called scale-up support.
Right.
So once you've started your business, that's fantastic.
Right.
But now you're trying to generate revenue, you're going after new clients, you're making sales.
Exactly.
So there has to be people who follow that experience that can help you get to the next level.
Exactly. 100%. And unfortunately we don't get, I've over the last few years of doing this business, I've met like great people and actual supporters that get from, but it's not, even after 3 or almost 4 years now, it's not to the extent that it should be. And honestly, I get it in some sense, because to be honest, what I've noticed about people of St. John is they like what they like. They're comfortable in their comfort zone.
Yep.
They would support you and say, this is beautiful. They'll come out on the Sunday market and buy the food once, but you're not going to see them from Monday to Friday.
And there's a lot of brand loyalty.
Right.
So what will happen with the local consumer is they'll find a restaurant like Tandi's or somewhere that they love, and they'll stick with it.
And they will stick. That's what I'm saying. So they like what they like. It's hard to get them out of their comfort zone. It's hard to get them to say, okay, Monday I want this, Tuesday I want this. No, if this is what they want, they're sticking to it all through. That's the thing.
Right. If someone was coming into the city in your position, it's January.
Right.
They're coming from a place that looks different, the people are different, the food is different. And they want to start a business. What kinds of advice would you give them? Maybe give a couple pieces of advice and say, you have to do this. If you want to be successful in St. John, you have to do this.
If you want to be successful in St. John, you have to be patient.
Good
you
word.
have to be patient. And this is coming from someone that's still on the journey to that, because I'm nowhere close,
10
right?
years in.
After all these years. And I continuously ask myself, really, what are you doing here still? And I have a lot of people that ask me the same question. And I tell them it's just, and I think maybe the second word I would look for is committed, in a sense. So I like a challenge. Maybe it's also a personality thing. But I'm like, why run over to Toronto and whatnot, right? Where a lot of people are already doing all this more competition and whatnot.
Yep.
Not that there's a problem with competition, but if I'm already here, and regardless of anything, St. John is home. St. John is all I moved here when I was 18. This was beginning of my adult. This is all I know. This is my network. This is everything, right? So, and there is a plain slate as well, right? We don't have anyone doing it here. If I came here and struggled with finding food and all those kind of things, right? And I know that I can provide that resource somehow, so that the next person that comes here, you know, tomorrow will not have to go through what I went through,
Exactly.
right? I can provide that for them. I would try, you know, I would try. Running a business is a whole different ballgame.
Yes.
Of course, I guess maybe 13 on the list is that you have to have a passion for what you do, right? Because if you don't have the passion and you're just looking to make money, you're going to run out of St. John, because it's not an easy place to immediately see.
Yeah, there are challenges. Yeah.
See revenue, right? Because there are a lot of challenges. So you have to be very passionate about what you're doing. Money, of course, is part of a business, but it shouldn't be the motive. Because if you're doing it just to see money immediately, you're going to go absolutely nowhere. So for me, my passion lies in the fact that it's something that I experienced, and because there's a lack of it, I'm taking it upon myself to at least open that door.
For
So
sure.
even if 2 years from now or 3 years from now or 5 years from now I'm no longer here, another immigrant that comes in, whether it's from Nigeria or whatever other country, will be like, that reads about this or is told about it, oh well, she did that and I can do it, and maybe
That's
they
right.
can invest another 10 years of their lives
But
here.
you bring a really fresh perspective to this, because
Right.
we shouldn't pretend that everything is perfect.
Absolutely not.
There's no utility in pretending everything is perfect.
No.
And I fear that sometimes what we do is, when we talk about how high our quality of life is,
Right.
yes, our quality of life is very high, but it doesn't follow if we use our quality of life excuse to not change,
Exactly.
to stay the same,
Exactly.
because we like how we live.
Exactly.
There are obvious changes happening in our community,
Exactly.
and they're changes for the better, as
Exactly.
long as we tackle it the right way.
Exactly. And you're absolutely right. And even when you say quality of life, the quality of life in St. John and even in Canada as a whole is great, because, I mean, even though I see the locals complain sometimes, the government
Yeah.
works, you know, compared
right.
to where
Yeah.
compared to where I'm from, right? However, if I compare the quality of life to what I personally would tag a quality of life as, which is exposure, enlightenment, getting out of your comfort zone,
Yeah.
quality of life is pretty low, you know?
Yes.
People are not aware that there's a world outside of this world.
And that is a very, very fresh perspective.
Right, because when I came here, a lot of people look at me, oh, you know, this girl from Africa, you know, that kind of thing. But when we get to talking, they're not really clear on what their understanding and everything that they know is based off of media,
Yes.
right? Which is very poor, because that's just one single story, right? Not a lot of people live, especially in St. John. I mean, if I go to Toronto, it's something different. Most people there are, you know, well exposed and traveled and whatnot. But honestly, like in St. John, it's really not the case. Not a lot of people, you know, get on the plane and say, let me just see what life is outside of this.
Yes.
Everyone is in a bubble. It's a structure. I go to high school, I may go to college, I may not go to college, I work, retirement money, I'm going to work up to 60 and graduate. That is not, that you're
Yeah.
existing, you're not living.
As someone who was born here,
Right.
and then spent a lot of time away, and then surprisingly even to me came back to be a professional,
Right.
you're 100% right that the world has shrunk.
Right.
So you are interacting with people from different walks of life every single day.
Exactly.
And that's why I always say that multiculturalism isn't easy, but if we do it right,
Right.
we are so much better off
Exactly. 100%.
Yeah.
100%.
for sure. What I want to wrap up with is we often talk about how newcomers in general and newcomer entrepreneurs have to adapt themselves to the local market. And that's definitely true. Like you mentioned, you have to encourage someone who hasn't tried your food before to not only try it, but pay for it.
Right.
Because paying for it means it can keep coming back to their table.
Exactly.
You can keep making it.
Right.
But I'm interested to know, we need to learn so much from you. We need to learn so much from the other participants of the Business Immigrant Mentorship Program in terms of quality of life and in terms of being a professional. What are some differences in the business culture and the social culture in Nigeria compared to St. John? What kinds of things are you bringing with you to St. John?
To St. John. That's a tricky question. So, because obviously worked for like maybe just a year, like when I was 16, like a petty job, right, before
Right.
I moved here. So I'm not too familiar with like the insides of the business job.
Mm-hmm.
However, I'm from an entrepreneurial family, so I do have like an idea.
In a fast-paced environment.
In a fast-paced environment. So if we're talking about differences, I think the biggest thing that stands up to me is that there's a lot of there's like 10,000 steps you have to go to like
Right.
do one thing. You know, you can't just, for example, you can't just like decide to run a food business. You
Right.
have to be licensed. You have to go this. You have to take permission from this and this. Before you even cook one meal, you have to write down
Yes.
the meal you want to cook, give them the recipe, give them all the ingredients that you're using, where you're buying the ingredients from, those kind of things. Now, there are certain programs in place, you know, back home as well, but it's not as tedious as it's here. Now, I understand why it's here, and I do agree with, you know, with how they do it here, to be honest with you, because I feel like that just creates better security and making sure that, you know, you're not poisoning people, right? That kind of thing. I'll say the second thing is like the aggressiveness, you know, from back home. When I say that, I mean in terms of like the rush and the drive to run the business, and the, you know, people are a bit more like laid back here.
Yep.
So, you know, for me, starting a business, like, oh yeah, you have a meeting, oh yeah, that's fine. Like nobody really, you know, and it
Or
may not
even
even
they
be
say,
fine.
It's amazing.
You know, and it may not even be fine, and then, but you know, they're just not as straight up.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
And especially for me, not just even culturally, like I'm a straight up person. Like if you don't like something, or it's not working
Yes.
for you, or you disagree, then give me the channel, let's work back. Don't tell me it's nice,
Yes.
it's amazing,
Yes.
and then you're not replying my emails the next day. You know what I'm
And
saying?
this has direct influence in the business world because,
Right.
like we said, if every person in St. John, because we are so polite,
Right.
come up to you and tell you your food's amazing,
Right.
but they never spend $1,
That's the problem.
where's the utility?
That's
Yeah.
that exactly is the problem. Like at the market, I have people that walk by. Oh, okay, oh, that smells so nice, and they just like walk by. Like, you know, like,
Yeah,
I'm not
yeah.
trying to be rude, but I know my food smells nice.
It's-
You know what I'm
it's-
saying?
it's
Like,
true.
what I need you to do is invest, you know, in my business as well. You understand?
Yes.
By being a supportive customer and monetary too. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that I can run this business full time and stay in St. John.
Yeah.
But if you're going to walk past me, you know, every time and not really commit to it and whatnot, like that's fine, because I'm never going to make anybody like what they don't like, you know. But it gives me a false pretense. It gives me, you know, like, because I'm depending on you to
Yes.
know if what I'm doing is going to ever make sense
Exactly.
in
I-
this
I-
city. So I need your honest opinion.
Right. I started a hashtag recently that was hashtag pay for great work.
Yeah.
If you want good products and services to come into the world,
Right.
you have to vote with your money.
You really do.
You have to pay.
You do.
So when we want multicultural cuisine, multicultural song,
Right.
multicultural dance,
Right.
we have to ensure that not only we're welcoming, but
Right.
we're a place that has supports in place for
Yes.
people like you that are starting
Right.
up their businesses.
Exactly.
Uchenna, we are learning a lot from you. Thank you
Yes.
so much for
Thanks,
coming.
Matt.
Cool.
Thank you, Matt. It's good to
Thanks.
speak to you. Yeah.